Hey, Steve Martin, how'd you like those scripts I sent you?
How'd you like a mouthful of teeth?
So, you didn't like them?
You know, everything is not an anecdote. You have to discriminate. You choose things that are funny or mildly amusing or interesting. You're a miracle. Your stories have none of that.
They weren't my scripts. They were from...
By the way, you know, when you're telling these little stories, here's a good idea. Have a point. It makes it so much more interesting for the listener.
Well, thank you for the feedback.
Didn't you notice eventually I started reading the vomit bag? Oh, and here's a gun so you can blow your brains out. You'll thank me for it.
Steve, I got it from here. I got it. You just relax or something, all right? What Steve Martin's trying to tell you is your script sucks ass. Okay, well, it sucks ass if it doesn't do the bare minimum that a screenplay needs to do, which is tell a competent story. Because that's all movies really are. They're a form of storytelling. But, you know, I won't have to make this most obvious point if I haven't been forced to read dozens and dozens of amateur screenplays that don't contain anything you could possibly call a story. They're just 120 pages of meandering crap.
Blaine, need or want? JC, I never been much for wanting. Blaine, spoken like someone with needs.
Oh, jeez. Sorry, keep going.
And this is actually no surprise, because a while back I realized what really separates the wannabes from the gonnabees from the arabees is just how well they understand just what a story actually is and how a story actually functions. Because everyone just assumes they know. But give me a definition. Right now, tell me, what is a story? I'll give you a minute. No, not really. Okay, a beginning, middle, end, but you can say that about a lot of things. I have no idea what you're talking about. Look, the point is, it's not so obvious. So in this video, I'm going to go super basic. I'm going to give you some absolute must-have, fail-in-your-dead knowledge about just what the heck you're trying to put together when you want to write a screenplay. First things first, if you want to be a storyteller, you should learn to tell the difference between something that's a story and something that's only a narrative. See, a narrative is merely a series of actions or events communicated in a logical order, meaning that if you told me your morning bathroom routine, that would be a narrative. If you explained the process of photosynthesis, that would be a narrative. If you gave instructions on how to make a chocolate cake, that would be a narrative. But those aren't stories. And the problem is a big chunk of amateur screenplays only present narratives and not stories. So what's the difference? Well, in my first book, Screenwriting Down the Atoms, I talk about this for a decent length and come upon this definition. A story is a narrative, A, about characters. You can't make a story about an empty room. B, dealing with a problem. Problems are key. C, unified by a premise. It's not a bunch of random stuff. And D, told in a structured order. But, you know, definitions are neat and all. But the real question, if you're a writer, is how does one construct a story that not only meets these qualifications, but maintains people's interest from beginning to end? Well, it's actually quite simple. Right now, I'm going to give you the golden key of storytelling. If you learn only one thing about screencraft, it needs to be this. Because there is one basic, absolutely fundamental structure to all competent storytelling. Not just movies, but stories in all forms. A structure that until 10 years ago when I published this, no one to my knowledge had bothered to explain. And it's called the story spine. And I can honestly say that out of all the bad screenplays I've ever read, around 90% could have been vastly improved if the writer simply understood this concept. Let's start with the name. Why is it called the story spine? Well, the story spine relates to plot. Plot is the arrangement of everything that physically happens in a story. Now, plot is often likened to the skeleton of a story. And if you look at some animal skeletons, you'll see they're not just a random bunch of bones. There's a structure to it all. In fact, if you compare an entire class of animals, like a bunch of quadrupeds, you'll notice that while they look really different on the outside, the structure of their skeletons is virtually identical. And the most important part of this structure is the spine. See, the spine runs the entire length of the animal. It's what everything else connects to. And it contains the spinal cord, which allows the entire body to move as a coordinated whole. Break the spine, and an animal's as good as dead. Now, of course, a plot skeleton isn't an arrangement of bones, but of story events. And organizing this all is the story spine. Like the spine of an animal, it runs the entire length of the plot. It's what everything else connects to, and it provides the dramatic impulse that allows the entire story to move as a coordinated whole. Remove the spine and the story is as good as dead. And best of all, the story spine is simple. It's so simple. It's so simple that after I explain it, I'm sure I'm going to have people who are going to be like, oh, well, no, duh, that's obvious. Well, if it's so obvious, then why do I keep getting so many shitty screenplays? Come on, people! Alright, the story spine is composed of 5 equally important components. Equally important. Think of it like a car engine. If you remove one part, the engine will no longer function. Doesn't matter how good the other parts are, they can't overcome that missing piece. Are you ready? Ready to hear this?
And here we go.
Number 1, the protagonist's main story problem. In my definition of a story, I said that all stories are about characters dealing with a problem. Whether we're talking about the 3 Little Pigs or you complaining about your deadbeat ex, all stories at their core are about a problem and the actions taken in response to this problem. This is fundamental for a few reasons. First of all, without a problem, there's no reason for characters to do anything. My old teacher Lou Hunter liked to say, no one wants to hear the story of the village of the happy people. This is because without a problem, there's no story. Because there's no motivation for characters to do anything outside of their normal humdrum existence. Problems are also essential for a story's social purpose, that is to communicate some sort of message or meaning. It's by presenting a problem, then showing how people respond to that problem, that stories express things about life and the world we live in. Now, a typical movie begins with the main character in their everyday world doing their everyday things, but the story has not yet begun for that character. The story does not officially begin until the arrival of a problem that forces the character to take actions they would not otherwise take. In Raiders of the Lost Ark, Indy learns the Nazis are searching for the Ark. In Die Hard, terrorists take over the building. In Groundhog Day, Phil Connors wakes to find he's stuck in a time loop. This moment is usually called the inciting incident or the inciting event, because to incite means to rouse to action. From this point onwards, the story problem becomes the sole focus of attention. Everything in the plot will somehow relate to the story problem and the efforts to resolve it. This means that until the inciting incident occurs, the real story has not yet begun. Everything before it is just setup. This is the reason why most teachers insist that you put the inciting incident before page 15 of a script. But time and again, I find scripts that don't introduce any kind of problem to like page 40. This means you expect audiences to sit and wait for 40 minutes before any kind of story finally starts moving. Nobody has that kind of patience. And what is worse, I often find scripts that never introduce any kind of story problem. I call these fish tank narratives. You ever watch fish in aquariums, how they just spend all day just swimming around with no purpose or reason? This is all that happens when there's no story problem. The whole script is just characters going, guess we'll go over here. No, I'll go over there. Let's go over here now. What's the bloody point? However, to really launch a story problem can't just be any kind of problem. It must be an issue of such enormity, such urgency, that it demands something be done about it right now. I like to use the analogy of the tiger in the living room. Let's say you wake up in the morning on a day like any other. With it'll come all the usual chores and responsibilities. Only today, you find a tiger in your living room. Well, that's a pretty big problem that's been suddenly thrust into your life, isn't it? Suddenly everything else becomes meaningless. Life can't go back to normal until you do something about that tiger in the living room. Okay, so the protagonist recognizes the problem and now feels compelled to do something about it. The next logical step is to establish, number 2, the protagonist's main story goal. The main story goal is a certain accomplishment the protagonist believes, once achieved, will overcome the problem and return life to what they want it to be. The goal is the problem's hoped-for solution. Now, I say the protagonist believes the goal will solve the problem. They might be correct about this, or later learn they're incorrect and need to adjust their goal. Like in Rain Man, where Charlie Babbitt first abducts his brother, but then realizes he's just being an asshole and there's a better way to get what he needs. Sometimes the goal is obvious from the start, and other times the story needs to develop a bit more before the hero can understand what they need to do, like Luke in Star Wars. Yet whatever the case, right or wrong, sooner or later, it's important to establish a clear story goal by the end of Act 1. Because it's with this goal that the story acquires a sense of direction. The protagonist's efforts are now heading towards a clear objective, and you've established a spine with a start and end point. Think of it like a road trip. When you go on a trip, do you just jump in the car and drive around randomly? No, you set a destination. That way your journey has a purpose, and you have something you're always traveling towards. This moment is also crucial for hooking the audience's interest. As soon as the story pairs a problem with a goal, a question forms in the viewer's mind. They ask, will the hero achieve X? Will Indiana Jones get the Ark before the Nazis? Will John McClane save the hostages? Will Phil Connors break out of his time loop? We call this the major dramatic question. The audience keeps watching because they want to know the answer to this question. I occasionally encounter scripts that introduce a story problem but never establish any type of goal. I call these whiner narratives because characters spend the entire script bitching and whining about the problem but never get off their butts to do anything about it. So instead of going anywhere, the story just kind of mills around without any direction. Which is bad because good stories are active stories. Stories about characters pursuing goals. Which means characters need to take definite actions towards definite objectives. Hence the spine's third component. Number 3, the path of action. The goal isn't just going to fall into the protagonist's lap. And if it did, that'd be pretty unsatisfying. In a good story, the problem is so big and the goal is so far away that the protagonist has to take things step by step, action by action, moving closer and closer to the final destination. Hence the story's path of action. The path of action makes up the majority of a movie's length, composed of everything the protagonist does to overcome the problem and get to the goal. Everything Indy does to find the Ark and get it safely to America. Everything John McClane does to beat the terrorists and save the hostages. Everything Phil Connors does to make sense of his situation and find a way out. Now, as these examples suggest, the path of action is a long and winding road, full of unexpected twists and turns, surprises, and developments. However, it's important that this path stay on track. No matter what happens, no matter what surprises they may encounter, the protagonist must stay focused on that end goal and keep taking actions intended to move closer to it, even when total catastrophe gets in the way. This, however, is where many amateur scripts go astray. What happens is the story loses focus and the protagonist starts doing things that have nothing to do with the established problem or goal. Basically, the story becomes like a hiker who wanders off the trail and is now lost in the woods. At other times, you find scripts that establish their problem and goal and start a clear path of action. Then at some point, the writer decides, screw all that, and tries to make the story about something completely different. Well, if you do this, not only have you broken your spine, not only are you changing horses in midstream, but you just gave the middle finger to the audience. You got them interested in one story and then took that story and threw it in the garbage. Of course, the path of action can never be easy. There's nothing interesting about a story where nothing goes wrong and everything's easily achieved. To be interesting, a story must be dramatic. And to be dramatic, it must have conflict. Number 4, the protagonist's main story conflict. To give a definition, conflict is a state of tension which exists whenever someone or something opposes a character's actions. A character wants to achieve X, but something's in the way. It's often said that conflict is the lifeblood of drama. But why is this? How does conflict create drama? Well, it's simple. Whenever two forces are in opposition, the outcome becomes uncertain. When viewers sense this uncertainty, questions form in their minds. What will happen? What will be the outcome? Who will win? Will the hero get what they want? And when the viewer has questions, they become mentally engaged because they want to know the answers. See, all drama really is creating questions and then delaying the answers in order to promote curiosity or suspense. And conflict is the most effective way to do this from moment to moment. So if your story is to be dramatic, the story spine needs some force keeping the outcome in doubt. With every attempt to push forward, there must be something pushing back, blocking the hero's path, threatening the hero with failure. And since the story has one central force pushing things forward, that is the protagonist, it's most effective when we also have one central force pushing back. In the spine, we call this the source of main conflict, or the force of antagonism. Quite often this opposition comes from another character, called the antagonist. And people often refer to the antagonist as the bad guy or the villain, but this need not be so. The antagonist need not be a bad person, just as the protagonist need not be a good person. The antagonist is simply someone who, for whatever reason, is dead set against the protagonist achieving their goal, and thus takes action to stop it from happening. And this is best done through what's called a unity of opposites. Unity of opposites means that what one person wants is so at odds with what the other person wants, that for one to win, the other must lose. Indiana Jones wants the Ark. The Nazis want the Ark. They can't both have it. The terrorists want to pull off their heist. John McClane wants to stop them before they kill everyone. Here there is no win-win. There is no compromise. One must win, the other must lose. Now, depending on the story, the source of main conflict isn't always as simple as another character. Sometimes the source of conflict is situational, like in Back to the Future, or it can come from society at large, like in Schindler's List. It can even be cosmic, like whatever's going on in Groundhog Day. Yet even in these cases, it's best if the conflict is channeled through particular individuals, like Biff in Back to the Future or Ralph Fiennes' character in Schindler's List. Why? Because cinema is a medium of visual action. The audience needs to see the conflict on the screen. So it's best if the character has someone to physically battle against. Now, for the entire story to be dramatic, this source of conflict can't be something weak or easily defeated, nor can it be something that comes or goes. It must be a constant threat, and the greater this threat, the greater the drama, because it throws the outcome into greater doubt. Sometimes I find scripts that have no source of conflict, and these are as boring as the fish tank narratives. At other times, this source is barely present, or it's a total weakling. Again, this creates little drama, as there's nothing to make us doubt whether the hero will succeed. At other times, I find scripts that instead of creating one centralized source of conflict, scatter multiple little conflicts throughout, which really amount to nothing more than minor annoyances. You might think more sources of conflict would equal more drama, but really the opposite is true. Take a look at Spider-Man 3. Can you really tell me this movie with its 3 weak-ass villains is anywhere as exciting as the first Spider-Man movie with its one strong antagonist? Spreading out the conflict only spreads the drama thin. So now we have a story with 4 components: a story problem, a story goal, a path of actions to that goal, and a source of conflict in the way. But if we leave it like this, our story has a serious issue. If the pursuit of the goal is made so difficult, dangerous even by the source of conflict, what's to stop the protagonist from deciding the goal is no longer worth it? If the hero is trying to do something, and the villain says, "Hey, stop doing that or I'll kill you," wouldn't a reasonable person say, "Well, I don't want to die, so I guess I'll just go home"? For a story to remain both dramatic and logical, the protagonist needs a reason to stay in the fight. There needs to be a dramatic counterforce that keeps pushing the protagonist forward in spite of all the threats and danger. The story thus needs the spine's final and most overlooked component. Number 5, the story stakes. Stakes is a gambling term, meaning what's to be won or lost in a game. Thus, high-stakes poker is a game where the player will either get rich or lose everything. Translated into dramatic terms, stakes are what the character has to gain if they succeed, and more crucially, the dire consequences that will occur if they should fail. If Indiana Jones should fail, the Nazis might take over the world. If John McClane fails, he, his wife, and dozens of other people might die. See, because the protagonist has something to win or lose, they're compelled to keep driving onwards towards the goal, no matter how dangerous or deadly this might become. Now, in a lot of Hollywood movies, the stakes are earth-shattering. Often the fate of the entire world or the lives of hundreds of people hang in the balance. But this isn't always necessary for effective drama. Stakes can be small and intimate, as long as they seem enormous to the protagonist. Take Rocky Balboa, for instance. What does Rocky have to gain from his fight with Apollo Creed? He's got a chance to finally win his self-worth, his self-respect, and the respect of everyone around him. That may not mean much to a random person on the street, but it means the world to him. So Rocky's going to fight his guts out to reach his ultimate goal. Now, along with providing this dramatic counterforce, stakes are also crucial for 2 other reasons. First, stakes explain character motivations. Stakes make clear why characters care about the situation and why they do what they do. In other words, stakes make character actions believable. I often receive scripts that contain no stakes. Here, the protagonist just throws himself headlong into danger for no good reason. These characters don't seem heroic. They seem stupid. Why take on such risk when the outcome is meaningless?
What happens if we lose?
Nothing! There's nothing at stake and no threat.
Secondly, stakes inform the viewer why they should care about the situation. If we're led to care about a story's characters, we naturally want good to come to them and not to see them come to harm. So when we know what is at stake for these people, when we know what terrible things will happen if they should fail, we root for these characters because we fear what will happen if they should fail. So, while conflict creates drama, good clear stakes elevate our sense of drama. We keep watching not just because we're curious about the outcome, but because we have attached our emotions to that outcome. So, let's sum it up, lollipop. Any well-told dramatic story can be summarized as follows. The protagonist encounters a story problem, one significant enough to compel them to pursue a story goal which will supposedly resolve that problem. The protagonist pursues this goal through a path of actions, only to meet enormous resistance from a source of conflict. The protagonist keeps fighting against this conflict due to the stakes attached to victory or failure. In the end, the protagonist either overcomes the source of conflict to reach the goal or is defeated by the conflict and fails. This is the story spine. This is the fundamental structure of movie storytelling. I previously said that 90% of the bad scripts I've ever read could have been vastly improved if the writer simply understood the story spine. Usually the problem is that one or more of the spine's components is missing, unclear, or weak. And this does severe damage to the story because a story without a problem will lack purpose. A story without a goal will lack direction. A story without a clear path of action will lack focus. A story without a main source of conflict will lack drama. And a story without stakes will lack significance. There's a simple way to tell if your script does have a complete story spine. Just turn it into a once upon a time. And once upon a time is an exercise where you tell your story as a fairy tale. If you can summarize your script in 4 to 6 sentences that contain a clearly articulated problem, goal, path of action, conflict, and stakes, you know you have a complete story spine. For example, once upon a time, there was an adventuring archaeologist named Indiana Jones. One day, Indy learned the Nazis were about to find the Ark of the Covenant. This was bad because the Nazis will use the Ark to conquer the world. So, Indy set out to find the Ark first. But as Indy begins his quest, the Nazis try to stop him. Indy finds the Ark, loses the Ark, gets it back, loses it again. But by using his wits and wisdom, the bad guys are beaten and Indy wins the prize. And they lived happily ever after. If you can't do this with your own plot, that means you do not yet have a clear and complete story spine. And that means you have some work to do. You'll find a lot more on the story spine and all the fundamentals of cinematic storytelling in my book Screenwriting Down to the Atoms. But if you like to try before you buy or you're just broke as hell, there's also the Absolute Essentials edition where I provide the 4 most important chapters absolutely free. Go ahead and get the free one, I don't mind. There's just 10 more chapters in this one. Please let me know in the comments if you'd like to see more of this basic screenwriting stuff in the future or if you prefer the more advanced stuff I have on the rest of this channel. Otherwise, please like and subscribe because it really helps out new channels like this one. I mean, I need all the help I can get. Look at this background. Look at this crappy lighting. The lighting keeps changing in the middle of the shots. That's the sun. I can't do anything about that. Give me 100 likes. I'll get better lighting. I mean it. I'll do it. Goodbye.